All right, hello and welcome to this video lesson. In this lesson, we're going to be solving the return a promise from a function challenge. And so here we want to be creating a new function called promise factory, and this function is going to match this type definition that we have here. And this function is basically going to create a new promise. And the function should create a promise based on these arguments here. So you should be able to pass in an argument should resolve, which determines whether or not the promise will resolve or reject, and also a time limit. So the time limit should specify how long the promise should wait before it resolves or rejects. And so as you would imagine, this function, promise factory, is basically something that you can call to produce new promises that have different properties. All right, so let's just dive right in. So we have a new function, promise factory, and we can go ahead and assign this the type that we have in the editor here. And this is going to accept these two arguments, should resolve and the time limit. And then we want to return a new promise from this function. So we can just go ahead and return new promise. And then of course, we're going to pass in our promise callback. So we pass in a function which takes two arguments, resolve and reject. And then we need to actually handle the logic for our promise here. And so we want to resolve this promise if this argument here is true. So we can say if should resolve is true, we want to resolve the promise. And else, well, if it's not true, then we want to reject the promise. All right. And so we can just, for the resolve portion, we can just call the resolve callback and we can say resolved. And for the reject portion, we can call the reject callback and say rejected. Okay, so this will handle resolving or rejecting the promise based on this first argument, but we also want to wait to do this for the time specified by this time limit argument. So we can call set timeout in here, whoops, like this, and we can pass in this time limit to our set timeout. And then we want to just take this code and move it up into the set timeout. So now our promise is going to start a timer, which will wait for this amount of time, and then it will either resolve or reject based on this first argument here. All right, so let's go ahead and run the code, and we'll see that this completes all the tests. Okay, so that's great. So this is really a more fully developed kind of piece of code here, where you can see kind of all of the pieces of a promise in play, where we're waiting for some time before we resolve to a value, and then we are either resolving or rejecting based on some parameter that we've provided here. All right, so that's going to wrap it up for this video lesson, and we will see you in the next challenge.